Now, Eric P. Bishop, welcome back to Suit Up the Podcast.
Thank you, Terrence. I am glad to be back for a repeat appearance.
You have had a lot happen since your last interview. So, catch us up to speed. First and foremost, congratulations on your release of Breach of Trust. Officially hit shelves yesterday.
Yes.
Switch, congratulations, hats off. Every book is an accomplishment, and this is the sequel
Yes,
to The
sir.
Body Man, which had a second print that went out like what, 3, 4 months ago now?
January, actually, and we can talk about
January.
that. A second
Yeah.
edition. We
Second
can talk about
edition.
why there was a need for a second edition. I'm glad to go. And I'm an open book, so I'll tell you whatever you want. But I'm not looking at the numbers so intentionally because I came up with a marketing plan, an idea of what I was going
Hmm.
to do, and inevitably if you look at sales numbers, which I've been told by many people over the years, don't ever, which
Hmm.
you have to because I'm now the publisher as well. So I have to know if
Yeah.
my marketing is working. So I normally look at the numbers every day, honestly.
Hmm.
I'm not this week intentionally because
Hmm.
I'll either be really excited, but really I'll be really disappointed because I'm not selling a bazillion copies. And in my head, I'm supposed to be selling a bazillion copies.
Hmm.
But so a fellow writer of mine a couple hours ago sent me a screenshot. He's like, dude, way to go. And I looked at it and I was number 14 on the new release list for Kindle ebooks. I think in the political thriller category, it's always hard to
That's
kind of know
awesome.
where. But yeah, was only a couple spots behind like Carr and a few other big name people. And I'm like, hey, little old Eric Bishop and his second sophomore, release will take whatever. And I think that was ebook. I think for physical books, I was number 24 or 25 for physical books in
Great.
whatever category for new release. So I'm like, I would love that to stay every day, and it probably won't, but that's okay. I'm not greedy with this because
Hmm.
any book sold, any copy sold is a blessing. Like right before we
Hmm.
came on here, I haven't posted it on the sites yet, but I just recorded a video just to tell, and it'll go out tonight, just to tell people thank you. I even got choked up during it, and it's 100% who I am and what I feel because I know how hard it is to get a book published. You know what it's like to publish a book and to whatever reception you get, you don't
Hmm.
take that for granted. You always want more. I mean, that's human
Yeah.
nature. You always, you see someone with a bigger, nicer house, more cars, and you go, ah, that Bentley looks really nice. Secret. Here's a pro tip. I've never had a Bentley, but person with the Bentley's probably really stressed out. They could be
Hmm.
over too much credit going on. However words you want to use to define that they could be overtaxed and pushing the limits, and they're probably worried about that nice big house and how do you heat that big house and cool it and who wants my money and all that. So probably being the simple man driving the nice, 6-year-old Honda Accord and being able to provide for your family and all that, you're probably winning. You're probably
Hmm.
winning.
Every time I have AC, I just remind myself most of human history, people have had to sweat. In many countries in today's day and age, they are still sweating under the hot sun. Are we not blessed to have
No,
this? Just, it's wonderful.
100%. I mean, I'm a little bit older than you. I don't know if I'm old enough to be your dad, but I'm 47, so I'm up the age bracket a little bit, slightly. Now we had AC when I was a kid. Yes, it wasn't some new. I
It
didn't come
wasn't like
over
in
on the ark.
it wasn't like in Flintstones.
No,
You didn't
we
have
threw stones
dinosaurs
at each
fanning
other,
you
of
guys.
course. We definitely threw stones at our friends because we didn't have bullets at that
That's
point.
because you cared about them, so you throw rocks at them.
Yes,
Perfect
that's what
little
you
boy
do.
logic.
What you did to the girls. You like a little girl, you throw
Yeah.
stuff at her and you hit her with a stick, and then hopefully, you can drag her off to the cave. I think that's what they did
Okay.
years ago.
What's funny is you make that joke. I introduced my fiance to The Quiet Man recently, which I'm not sure if you've seen that John Wayne film, but basically he drags
Not.
Maureen O'Hara from like one end of Ireland to the other, and an old lady like hands him a stick and goes, "Here's a stick to beat the lovely lady with." Can you imagine? She did not think that that was as funny as I did.
So, as a newly engaged person and someone that I had got engaged in, I should know this, 2002, the one and only time I got engaged, one and only time I got married. I've been divorced, so I'm like I said, I give you some free knowledge before we started filming. Don't take it, don't listen to anybody. Um, but yeah, women's sense of humor. Pro tip, another one for everyone listening. their sense of humor is different from our sense of humor. And things that we might think funny, they think we're the stupidest dumb
Hmm.
butt that God created. And they might be right sometimes, but we're still funny.
So let's talk about breach of trust. First of all, I do want to give you kudos. Brilliant book. Great
Thank you.
job. What was the process for this book? Because so there's a quote by Winston Churchill that I absolutely adore, which is
Mhm.
basically that when you write a book, it's like slaying a monster and then throwing it before the public. And I love
Very
that
accurate.
illustration because each book is kind of its own animal and its own beast that you have
Yeah.
to overcome and defeat. So, what was it like writing Breach of Trust by comparison to The Body Man and Ransom
Mhm.
Daughter? And did you know the story was going to be when you finished The Body Man? How long did it take for the genesis of the sequel?
So it's interesting. It's a great question. So the Body Man was kind of wrote in a smaller time period.
Hmm.
I had written three books. The Body Man was my fourth book, and I just know I needed to write something different. So I created this whole
Hmm.
new world, the Body Man's world, basically. Um, I don't even remember now how long it took me. Honestly, it's been years. I mean, I wrote that. I started writing that in 2017 or eight, early 18, maybe. But it didn't take, elongated time period. Um, then I started doing what you always do. You shop it around. And
Hmm.
while I was shopping around, I already knew, okay, I know where I left the body man off. I'm kind of gonna jump right back in with the story. And it stayed relatively true to what's the in breach of trust now. But I only wrote about a quarter of the book. And then life happened. I actually
Hmm.
separated, ended up going through a divorce. I was still trying to push the body man because I'd been trying for
Hmm.
about a year to get the body man in someone's hand. And then just it was a full stop on writing. I didn't write for about a year and a half. I wrote virtually nothing. And what I did write,
Wow.
I didn't keep.
Hmm.
Well, I was going through,
Yeah,
we
you're
talked
going
offline
through
about it.
stuff.
Yeah, you're going through a divorce and you've got little kids and you're living that life. The dream of writing all of a sudden you think is meaningless. And then
Hmm.
what you end up, for me, what I ended up writing was just horrific. It wasn't
Hmm.
like pro marriage, pro women, pro
You mean you weren't the
anything,
most
pro
positive
courts.
person in the world at that point?
I was a jack. You know what? I mean, I was mean. I was bitter. I was
Yeah.
upset. I was hurt. I was going
Hmm.
through all these emotions. And the
Hmm.
last thing I was that ended up being therapeutic was the or last thing that would be therapeutic for me at the time was writing. It wasn't therapeutic. It was the
Hmm.
last thing because I just went to a dark place anytime and I wrote some stuff and I don't didn't keep any of it. I deleted all of it.
Hmm.
Um, Ironically, the day we went to court required mediate, don't go in the details, but be
Yeah.
honest. I like to be open with people. The day we went to mediation, because up going up to mediation, which took months, I
Hmm.
was just a nervous wreck. I wasn't writing. Am I going to be able to see my kids? What's the money aspect? Because typically the guys obviously end up having to pay and sometimes pay a lot of money and have to get a second job just to survive.
Hmm.
So I was very nervous with it. So we went to the mediation and it was fair. It was fairer than
Hmm.
I thought it was going to be. I
Good.
had to fight for my rights, but it went okay. I, I don't know how else to say it, but I literally felt that burden come off me. I felt like I took a breath as I walked
Hmm.
out of the lawyer's office, about 30 minutes from where I live now, and I sat down and I started writing a novel. I didn't go back to Breach of Trust. I sat down and I started writing a brand new novel, and I got about a third of that novel done. And on the day, and I mentioned this in the acknowledgments in the book, and it's not a made up story. It's 100% true. The day my divorce finalized, that all the parties signed it, the day my attorney said, "I just emailed you the documents, it's done." 4 hours later, I got a contract for three books, something I had worked starting with the
Wow.
Body Man, something I had started doing in 2017, 18, and I'd been
Hmm.
writing since 2014. It was weird, and it just it's like the day your next chapter of your life starts, really the
Hmm.
next chapter starts, because I was able to be a published author that year.
Hmm.
So then all of my efforts went into the Body Man, obviously, and then once the Body Man got submitted and published, got submitted, and then it was still fix
Hmm.
things and
Yeah.
market and all that stuff. Once it published, I picked Breach of Trust back up, reacquainted myself with the
The characters in the world.
25,000 or quarter of the book that was there. Yeah. And I then started writing it in 2000 end of 2021 into like April or May of 2022.
Hmm.
Um, so the quick version is I wrote it. I went through it multiple times. I gave it before the publisher even got it. I gave it out to about a half dozen people that I trusted, people that are in
Yeah.
the industry. One of them really a very successful best-selling author. I said, okay, what do we got? And all the responses I got back was, dude, winner. You got better than the Body Man. I'm like,
Hmm.
golden. All right. Sent it to the publisher in that summer. I didn't hear anything till November. The publisher was just like, hey, I've got other things going on. This is on the back burner. So I said, well, that's not going to get published that soon. And then when I heard back from the publisher that rewrite it, not pleased with it. Not what I think you can do better. And I'm like, excuse me, excuse it. And it wasn't an ego thing. Like
Yeah, and that's not
anything
just
I
a tiny, oh, change this, minor little tweaks. That's complete
Yeah, like
studs.
rewrite, like you
No.
can do better than this. Go
Yeah,
back and fix it. And it wasn't
no.
like you have to change every piece of it, but it was basically go rewrite the book,
Oh,
write the book better, do a better job. And I'm just so
yeah.
I lost my mind for a few hours. I'm like, oh
Yes.
my goodness. And then I thought, well, everyone's lying to me. So I went back to the six or so authors and I just sent the email from the publisher.
Yeah.
What am I missing here? And every single one of
Hmm.
them came back and they're like, this person doesn't know what they're talking about. That's wrong. That's not true.
Hmm.
Yes, it needs edits. Yes, it needs fine tunes, but that's the job of
That's how
the editing.
editing works.
That's why you have a publisher. That's kind of
Yes.
their job. Your job isn't
Hmm.
to submit something that has zero errors in it because the publisher should edit. It's part of the gig. That's
Hmm.
why they're keeping 85% of the revenue because they got to do a
Hmm.
little work for it. So I spent some time to mull it over and talk to some people that were important in my life at that time. And I went back to the publisher and I just said, no, no, not change. I'm not even fixing one word from it. I will not fix it.
Hmm.
I will not write anything else. There's a clause in our contract of how we can end this relationship.
Hmm.
I'm pulling it. Let's do it. So there was some not so nice back and forth. And finally, the publisher relented. Ironically, this is I haven't told many people this one, but why not? Let's be honest. There was someone that also knew the publisher and had to deal with them. So I reached out to that person that day and I said, hey, you know a good lawyer? I need a lawyer that can deal with literary stuff. Literally within 2 hours, the publisher said, changed our mind. We're going to let you out of the contract. So that person called, talked to the publisher, and the publisher said, well, he's going to lawyer up. And it was stupid to lawyer up for. It's just like,
Oh, yeah.
we're at an impasse.
Yeah.
Just give me the books
Hmm.
back. But
Hmm.
the caveat was publisher said, we're going to keep publishing The Body Man. And I'm like, I'm okay with that. You bought the
Yeah.
rights for it.
Yeah.
And yes, they did buy the rights for two more books, but clearly we're in an impasse here.
Hmm.
And it's not your creation. It's completely my creation.
Hmm.
Give
And
it
there's a
back.
reason there are these contracts in place, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. So we parted ways as not friends, and I said, okay, I kind of realized within a couple months I'm just going to put Breach of Trust out under my brand because at that point,
Hmm.
once a first book in a series is published through someone, another agent or a publisher doesn't really want to touch it unless it's
Hmm.
sold a bazillion copies, and it's sold
Yeah.
really well, much better than the industry average for a small publisher, but still not good enough to get a big publisher to get excited. And I don't want to. At that point, I was sour to small publishers.
Hmm.
So I said, well, maybe I'll self-publish it. Well, that took months to work on. In the meantime, I got Ransom Daughter ready as my kind of
Hmm.
my foray into the
Hmm.
self-publishing indie world. And
It was kind of like your pilot to an
it was
extent.
100% that's what it was. And in the meantime of working all that, the publisher got back to me and said, hey, we're going out of business. As soon as it's liquidated, you'll get for free, you have the rights back to the Body Man. And I'm like, golden, cool. So that took like 6 months. And then
Hmm.
so early this year, I finally got the official stationery, like we're dissolved, the rights are back to you. And I spent the time, what I actually did, and I did talk about this in a podcast the other day. Because the Body Man second edition is the same story, but it's less and it's a little tweaked. Well, I took the file I submitted to the publisher, not the
Hmm.
file the publisher printed
Ooh.
or
Hmm.
created, because they made
Yep.
changes. So I went back with the original file and had that professionally edited, and that's what the second edition became. Same
Hmm.
story, but about 10% less, 10-15% less words in
Hmm.
volume.
Which,
And then,
if you
yeah,
don't mind
rock
my
and roll.
asking, what did you notice was the main differences between, because I know going back and reading something I wrote years ago, the
Mhm.
the shock to me sometimes is, oh, I have improved as a writer or I'm a different person now. And you went through a lot of stuff between
Yeah.
then to then.
See all
How
these gray hairs? Come on, T. You think those are painted on, baby? Those are earned.
no, no, yeah, you've got the good gray temples going. Paint your Clooney
Shut up. I'd
years.
rather have a full head of dark hair, luscious, and but I'll age gracefully, thank you, instead of just for men. Nah, maybe one day you'll see me with a dark head. You'd be like, "You liar! You did just for men." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a big deal now. I Amazon Prime bought my rights, and I have a jet, and I need dark hair. I got
I hope
art.
that they do that for you because that would make me endlessly happy. The so
You'll still have me on, and we'll be buddies. Don't worry.
yes.
I
Okay,
won't forget
good. You're never
anybody.
gonna get too big for Suit Up the podcast. All right.
No,
Perfect.
never, never. Trust me, never.
So what was it like going back and doing those edits and just like what was the experience like and what did you see that was different that you changed?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember specifics of what I cut out, and nothing's popping in my head because that was,
Okay. I was just curious if there were
but
any
that's
trends or
okay.
yeah.
Well, I can though answer the question because I don't remember every specific. What I found is instead of saying 8 words, I could say something in 4. So I just started
Mm-hmm.
going through and saying, "Hey, this is a good scene, but do I need a half a page of dialogue? No, I can
Yeah.
probably take out." So I just started taking out lines, and I had some funny quips that
Mm-hmm.
after I read it, when I wrote it years before, I'm like, this is pretty funny. And I'm reading it going, yeah, it's kind of juvenile. And there's, trust me, still juvenile stuff in there. But, the story can get by without that. So that, the people
Mm-hmm.
that bought the first draft, they have the same book or the first edition, they have the same book, but there's definitely some stuff in there, some anecdotes in there that just aren't in the second book. But the second book was
Mm-hmm.
just a little bit more streamlined.
Mm-hmm.
And then with Breach of Trust, I even did it even more. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't think in the sense necessarily of pages. I always work in like words.
Yes.
So if I recall, the first edition of Body Man was at like about 115,000 words.
Mm-hmm.
Which, depending on your format on hardcover, I think that's like 440 pages or something like that. So my second edition, well, hold on. Why question it? Because it's
And
right
it's
here. And I get
it's a
my
beautiful addition, by the way.
it came out. I'm very pleased with my editor, with my cover designer. I did the design inside by myself. I use software, so
Mm-hmm.
it's like designed for monkeys. I mean, you don't have to be you can have a room full of monkeys and they can make a book easy. So it's under 400 pages. The actual so
Mm-hmm.
390 something. And that came in at somewhere like 90.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, 97,000 words maybe is what that got me
Which
to.
which I
And then
think is like a really solid word count.
yeah, Breach of Trust came in a lot smaller. So Breach of Trust came in closer to around the 345 mark. And
Mm-hmm.
that one though was closer to like 92,000 words, I think, if I recall. Multiple reasons for that. First of all, back to the Just for Men. I'm getting older. My attention span is going to pot. I
Mm-hmm.
get bored easily on stuff. I mean, I'm going to give you about 3 more minutes and then I'm going to take a nap. So, we're done, man. I'm old. I'm kidding. But no, when I'm picking up books, I find that I'm sometimes going like, yeah, yeah, get to the
Mm-hmm.
chase. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So it's like I want to start putting out books that are just tighter. And now
Yeah.
I know guys personally, and I'm aware of authors that put out these 125,000 to
You've got
160,000.
those Tom Clancy novels behind you that you can brain someone with. They're big enough.
Those are my John Wick props that if someone breaks into my house, I'm going to kill because I've seen John Wick 4 enough that I'm going to kill
Yes.
them with one of those books.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Seriously. Wait, was it 3 or 4? I don't know. See,
I
I'm
think it's
old. I'm
three,
forgetting.
but it's
Okay.
still like, hey,
Shut up, T. I don't like you. You're cut off. You're when the billions come in, I forgot about you already. Yeah, I mean, I'm old. Why are you making fun of old people? No, I just watched it with a friend the other day. 3. I should
oh, it's
I should
such a
remember
great
it was
movie.
3. This such a yeah. My so real quick, we'll sidebar this. What are your favorite movies in order for John Wick?
I think that it's definitely John Wick 1, 3, and I think it might be 1, 3, 4, and then 2.
Interesting.
Because I think the first one just is the clearest, it's the cleanest movie of them all because it has the most mystery to it, the most interesting elements. But then number 3, I think just the action in it is unmatched.
Mm-hmm.
Number 4, I love the movie. I think the comedic timing and some of the elements are really good. It builds off of stuff in this third movie, but it does go a little long. It does feel like it has this extra bit to it,
Okay.
which I would rather they did that than make a fifth one. Number two is really good and I like it. It's just I feel like the others have things that just notch them above. It's like one and then everything else for me is almost the
Well,
same line. How about
you're
you?
wrong. I'm going to tell you you're wrong, but that's
Okay,
fine. You
that's
know,
fine.
young folks can definitely be wrong. See, I go 2, 1, 4, 3,
Really?
and I can't give you a scientific reason why. I know when two is on, I get really excited. One
Hmm.
was really good and probably is the best one because it introduced the world to John Wick, I guess you
Hmm.
should say. But something about the way they played off two, I liked it better than one. And then so then I
Hmm.
have to debate 3 and 4. Three, I think, and again, people are going to hate me that probably hear this. The martial arts in three, while they're really cool,
Hmm.
they just don't stop, and I get
Oh,
bored. I
and
get
by
bored with it.
comparison to Donnie Yen, like honestly, that whole if I think about Toulon in number four, that whole opening set piece in Okinawa
Hmm.
could like be some of the best John Wick action we get in the entire franchise.
Yeah.
Just because it's this we could go far too into the weeds of this, but just the cinematography of those scenes is
Yes.
absolutely jaw-droppingly gorgeous. And Donnie Yen is amazing in it as a blind swordsman.
The way he swing. Oh man, yeah. I can't swing that, and I'm not blind. I couldn't even come close to swinging any of those things. And what's cool, and if you watch some of the document, the back behind the scenes
I haven't seen the
extra.
behind the scenes stuff on it.
Oh, you need to watch them because conventionally in Hollywood, when you're having firearm and stuff like that, like the thing that happened with Alec Baldwin, the big
Yeah.
suit with killing someone, the accidental killing and all that, is they use blanks. Well, blanks
Hmm.
still is
Yeah.
around. It just doesn't have the capacity that's normally kill someone. They don't use like traditional blanks in any of the John Wicks. All the sounds are put in like post production. There might be a click or whatever, but it's
Yeah.
not. You don't hear that. So the
Wow,
muzzle
that's a
flash.
lot of amazing editing that they have to do.
I
Because
know the
it's not like there's
muzzle
only one or
flash
two
alone.
shots.
I know. So yeah, it's gun porn is what it is, but it's it's the good version. I mean,
Hmm.
it's just and I know
Hmm.
people that hate the movies, like, oh my goodness, John Wick's horrible, and I'm like, and if it's a man, I normally say, man card, please. We're
Yes.
gonna revoke that. If it's a
Hmm.
woman, can't do that, or you're gonna get, they're gonna turn the
I,
stick on
I
you.
already know my fiance is not going to watch those movies with me. It's okay. I've made my peace with it. Um,
That's a guy time.
it
That's a guy time.
is. It's a guy movie. So getting back to word count,
Sidebar
I
over.
sidebar over. I think that you really are on trend. For
Mhm.
what personally, like example being, I have the James Bond books behind me.
Mhm.
Those Ian Fleming novels are just tight,
Yeah.
quick, beautiful reads. They came out with, and she's a wonderful person, so don't get me wrong, but I'm publicly on record already saying I don't like the Double or Nothing and Double
Mhm.
O trilogy they came out with recently. That is the rest of like other Bond, like other Double O agents. It's written
Yeah.
by lovely lady Kim Sherwood, great activist in the Bond community, whatever.
Hmm.
The book is too long. It's just frankly too long. It's like
Yeah.
350 pages with
Right.
three different characters and overwritten for
Hmm.
my tastes.
Right.
You have to keep a book moving at a good pace. And one of the
Yeah.
things I really enjoyed, I read Breach of Trust, ironically enough, on the airplane. So I
Okay.
had a work trip. So like the joke is that like these Tom Clancy and Vince Flynn, these are airport novels. I
Hmm.
literally read your book as an
Very
airport novel. And
awesome.
I got that first half through in the airport and it just breezed right
Cool.
through. It was beautiful.
Thank
So
you.
like kudos to you. It is a very readable book, which
Thank you.
is not something that sadly it should be like the default.
Hmm.
But the reality is there are stuff being professionally published today by
Yeah.
big name publishing houses that are not just enjoyable reads.
Yeah. Well, and to answer that, to expound upon that a little bit
Yeah.
further, one of the things I've learned as, because now I'm looking at, let's see, 5, 6. So I've completed 7.
Hmm.
Not really got the seventh one done. So I've now and I've got 3 that are like really pretty far along. Plus I have some other projects. Plus I've done novellas,
Hmm.
short stories. So I'm over the million word mark now.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I've noticed as I've kind of glanced back at some of my earlier writings is I would write really long chapters because I was telling the story and I was telling the whole story of what was happening, a lot of backstory, a lot of just a lot of stuff that didn't need to be there. And then I didn't because they were first of all long chapters, so people could fall asleep reading, or it had never been published, but you could fall asleep, or I could fall asleep reading my own chapters. But they didn't always end like in a cliffhanger, kind of like, ooh, what's
Hmm.
going to happen? And so one of the things I've learned, I don't say I do it all the time, but my
Hmm.
intention is to have every chapter be small enough that people can read it fairly quickly. And then also don't give them a reason to stop reading that chapter.
Hmm.
I want them to read that book as quickly as possible. I don't want them to say, yeah, I started your book. I started The Body Man the second edition back in January, and I'm already on chapter 7. You're like, yo, it's June. They're like, oh, yeah, this thing's boring as can be, but I feel obligated to finish it. So, yeah, so thank you. It's a high compliment, and that's what I'm going for. And I know it's not look, I know it's not for everyone. There
Hmm.
again, there are plenty of books out there that make the New York Times bestseller list, and I might know some of the authors sometimes, and I start reading it, and I'm like, eh, because I've also with I used to if I started a book, I finished it. Didn't
Hmm.
matter. Didn't matter if I couldn't stand it. I felt like I either bought this or someone gave it to me. Someone's asking me to review it. I've got to read every word. I got over that years ago. I have
Hmm.
no problem skipping chapters. I have
Yes.
no problem unofficially, this is an unofficial statement. I have no problem just skipping the end, reading the last chapter, and then saying something kind.
Yeah.
Because anyone that puts the effort in, writes a
Hmm.
book, even if I personally don't enjoy the book,
Hmm.
they probably do, and probably their mom does. And that might be the only two people. But I'm not going to crush their dreams and be like, hey, there's a big bridge out in San Francisco. You might be able to clear the nets if you jump really far. No, I'm never going to
Hmm.
do that to anyone. So try to find something nice. And I don't make it up either. So I don't write
Hmm.
some eloquent blurb for someone and just expound. Fortunately, all the books that I've been asked to read for like blurbs or any of that, I legitimately have enjoyed, or I've enjoyed enough to a point that I could say something positive, and I really
Hmm.
thought people could get something out of it, even if then it's not my favorite.
Hmm.
Because by the time I get them, it's been vetted enough typically that they are pretty tight. Most of the errors are fixed. And the people that I just happen to be blessed to know are creative.
Hmm.
But yeah, I don't. Again, if you don't, parents taught us growing up, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all.
Hmm.
Now I know I ate those words because earlier we were talking about my publishing experience, but so I'll counter that and say, hey, all those hard times and all the animosity that I was kind of feeling with the publisher, they gave me a chance. They
Yeah.
helped open the door for me that no one else was
Hmm.
doing. I
Hmm.
wasn't getting published. I probably would have had to self-publish if they hadn't given me the chance because I was getting so sick of just querying and have people say, "Man, this is a really good book, but I don't think I can place it right now because Trump's here or this and that." I had some of the dumbest reasons. They'd be like, "Political thrillers aren't selling right now," and I'm like, "Brad Thor's got a book that's on the top bestseller list." And I know I'm not Brad Thor.
Hmm.
Trust me. I'm very, very, that's, I've even been told by someone, you're no Jack Carr. And I'm like, oh, that's very nice. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm not trying to be Jack Carr, but
I'm trying to be the best Eric Bishop. Thank you.
that's what and that's that. I appreciate you saying that and exactly the way you said it, because that's what I've tried to then remind
Hmm.
myself and tell other people of, look, don't try to be the best version of somebody else out there because you're
Hmm.
not them. Be
Yes.
the best version of yourself. And
Hmm.
use Jack as an example, and I use him in podcast example. He's a great guy. I literally have a box sitting over there that I haven't opened. That is his next release, and he has sent me a book for 6 years. And I have the case that his fans would probably come in my house and shoot me for is sitting on a unopened on my kitchen table. And he's generous enough to send me a book every year, and I don't
Awesome.
deserve it, but I met him early on, and he's that kind of a guy. All that to be said, don't try to be Jack Carr, because if you try to be
Hmm.
Jack Carr, you're not going to be Jack Carr. There's
Yeah.
one Jack Carr. He's got the background that's selling. He's
Hmm.
got the stories that people are enjoying. He's got extreme violence that in some of the stories that people are liking.
Hmm.
Don't mimic that. Do now learn the lessons maybe of how
Hmm.
if you want to learn a lesson from Jack Carr without mimicking Jack Carr is that dude does not quit. You
Hmm.
don't see Jack Carr sitting. Sometimes you see pictures from him on Lanai because he has a hunting job or some kind of preserve in Lanai that he works at or goes to. So sometimes I guess he is just sitting down. But look at his social media posts. Look at the videos he posts. That dude hustles. And I've
Hmm.
been on the phone with him more than one time. I've met him in person more than one time. He's not sitting around just being like, "Hey
Hmm.
man, what's going on?" It's what's going on, what's going on. Da, 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 da. I mean, I'm sure at some point he probably sleeps, but it could be like the line I have in Breach of Trust when the president says to the body man, "Do you ever sleep?" And he's like, "When," like Bon Jovi says, "When I'm dead." I think Carr might he might have somehow saw he never read my book, but he might have seen that line or read or he's an 80s child. He's heard that song and he's
He's
I
definitely heard
think
that song.
embraced that. I'll sleep when I'm dead.
Hmm.
But that's also a good lesson to be learned for people trying to get in the publishing business is A,
Hmm.
it's really, really hard.
Hmm.
B, if you want to be successful, you're gonna have to work really hard. There's a few people that just kind of stumble into it and they get a big deal or something happens. That's the 1% of the 1%.
Hmm.
And
They're the
typically those,
exceptions that prove the rule.
yeah. And those are typically also the people that normally disappear fast
Hmm.
because they hit lightning in a bottle and you don't hit lightning in a bottle twice. So you'd rather be the author that works really hard. And I hope I'll end up being one that, hey, your first book does pretty well. Hey, your second book does well, or maybe even a little better. And hey, your third book. And you start that upward, rise versus you start really big. I mean, if you go and sell, and very few people do it. I think the stat is less than 10 books a year sell a million copies, I think is what some of the
Hmm.
numbers that have come out through the Penguin, through the merger and all that stuff. A lot of dirty details that no one would ever always people want to know but could never know. They had to be
Hmm.
put out with the lawsuit that happened a couple years ago. And I think one of those numbers is like less than 10 books sell a million copies a year. I mean, and that's sizable sales, but that's not the author making $50 million off the book or anything crazy, even selling a million copies. You're not on Golden Street.
Hmm.
So, but if you are one of those, so Breach of Trust got a big publisher and I sold a million copies. The next book, which does have a title, probably come out in 2026. I haven't written, I've only started it and I'll get back to it next year because I have three other books to work on first.
Hmm.
That next book better sell over a million copies because if I go sell 200,000 copies after my million breach of trust, guess
Yeah.
what? I have a breach of contract because they're going to cancel me and say, "See ya, dude, you suck. We don't want you to write books for us anymore." Um, so don't build high expectations, or be careful if you do, because you might need a pen name at some point, and you're writing under a different publisher.
One of the things in your story that I really appreciated is the that you sent your book out to people that you
Mm-hmm.
trusted in the beginning. And I think that that's one of the not not discussed enough elements of the writing life
Yeah.
is being able to have those people that you can trust their opinions on and
Mm-hmm.
build a community and tribe,
Yep.
which for writers especially because it's a singular activity. As
Mm-hmm.
much as like there, yes, writers retreats exist, so that a whole bunch of people can sit around in a room and not talk to each other and stare at whatever they're working on and maybe then
Exactly.
talk about it later. But
Right.
like you hear about things like the Inklings, which is probably the most famous writers group of ever.
Mm-hmm.
Without having community, you don't always have some of the best ideas that come about. Even
Right.
pre-recording, you were telling me about just some of the stories you would hear from people with the Boy Scouts. Like
Mm-hmm.
we writing is not just the activity of writing. It does come from having interactions with real people in the real
Yeah.
world that you glean things from, iron sharpens irons, all that stuff, which is my segue into asking about the podcast that you
Okay.
have launched this last year. So tell
Yes.
me about A Tale of Two Scribes.
Yeah, we're rivals apparently. So you're younger than me and you're trying to steal my thunder. Or no, you started
No, no,
before
no,
me.
because
So I'm trying to
I'm
steal
going
your
to be
thunder.
the very best Terrence Lehue, and you're going to be the best Eric Bishop. Which, okay, wait, before I leave that remark, I do want to just add one of
Yeah.
the best things I ever heard was there's going to be political thrillers, romantic comedies, spy stuff. There's always going to be that genre. The
Hmm.
key is writing your version of it
Yes.
so that people want to come back to your secret sauce. The secret sauce
Yeah.
is the writer. It
Right.
isn't aping someone else's, which I
Yep.
love that that's your mindset and you've embraced it very well because you are Eric Bishop. So
Yes.
you are an
Thank
amazing
you.
Eric Bishop.
I appreciate you. That means a lot. I appreciate you saying that. So the joking aside, yeah, the podcast kind of happened not by chance or anything. So quick version is 2 years ago, I was a guest on Spear Talk,
Hmm.
which is hosted by John Guarnieri, who was a former Secret Service agent under President Obama.
Oh,
And
cool.
he had, through a mutual friend of ours, who I was on his podcast last night, Jason Piccolo, John had heard about me and read my book. Well, I get a direct message like a little over 2 years ago now. Some dude I don't know says, "Hey, I got a podcast. You want to come on it?" And your answer when you're a nobody, and probably when you're even a somebody, is yes. It doesn't matter who it is. You could be a serial killer, and I'm going to come on and talk to you. And at least the serial killer might buy my book before he goes kill some people, and maybe those people can buy the book before he kills them. Kidding, joking aside. So I don't know much about him, get on the podcast, and we just connect. And so offline we talked. And I said, well, who are you security director for? What's you do? And he goes, well, I left the Secret Service and I went into private, work. And he goes,
Mhm.
I do for bands. So I'm the security director for Motley Crue, Shinedown. His company does Nickelback, Morgan Wallen. I think they did Kiss.
Wow.
Yeah, Extreme. He was just out with Extreme last Thanksgiving and Christmas time. So I'm like, and I looked at my thing. I'm like, oh yeah, and I knew who Shinedown was. I knew some of their songs, but I wasn't like a super fan. I was like, oh yeah, Shinedown's coming to Greenville, South Carolina, close by me in May. And he goes, yeah, you want to come? Bring the family. I said, oh, my daughter doesn't want to, but I'll bring my son. So the short version is we go, we connect, come to any show you want. You're part of the family, basically, pretty quickly. And we started talking about writing projects. And hey, maybe we can do some writing together, which we've been working on now for a while, too long. We're still working on it. That morphed into him wanting to grow the Spear Talk brand. And he started a new
Hmm.
podcast about 2 weeks before mine started. So this was all planned out around the same time. But he
Hmm.
started doing a podcast with Eric Bass, who is the bassist for Shinedown,
Oh, cool.
and called Taco Tuesdays. He also has a podcast under his brand called Strong Enough, by Claudia King, who is really a person about empowerment, helping
Mhm.
people that have been put in horrible situations as women and finding a way out of it and knowing that there's hope. So she's an amazing woman. I've been on her podcast. So the conversations came up of like, well, maybe we can bring on do a writing centric podcast. So I gave him kind of a
Hmm.
list of ideas of names, and he said, and it was about a dozen. And he goes, "A Tale of Two Scribes." Now that's a cool one. I'm like, thank you. I'm a writer. It literally, A Tale of Two Cities is sitting back here. It's hard to see with the light, so I stole it from Dickens. I
I
mean,
mean, if you're gonna steal, steal from the best.
yeah, thanks, dude. You're dead. It doesn't matter.
Sure, it's
Um,
in the public domain.
yeah, exactly. And so yeah, that's how that kind of created. And for me, I was involved in a podcast years ago, and it was kind of a not positive experience. Was going through my separation. Um, I have to own my business, and my business on that is I had no business probably being in a podcast because I was so mentally messed up
Hmm.
at that point. So we parted ways. The guys kept doing the podcast. There was four of us,
Hmm.
four little boxes, and then an author.
Yeah.
We had to script things out so we didn't overtalk each other. So you had to have all your questions in advance, and it had to be there was some ad lib, of course, but
Hmm.
it had to be kind of like, it's your turn, it's your turn, it's your turn, it's your turn. And I bowed out. Glad I did because it started interfering with my writing, and more importantly,
Hmm.
I started to have days where, and multiple, where I had custody. So and my kids even talked about it recently. They'd have to sit out in the hall of my office while I filmed a podcast for 2 hours, at
Hmm.
night or whatever. And that just, it sucked. So I had a real like, get me out of here. I don't even like talk to the people anymore, which is sad. But so I didn't know that I want to go back to podcasts. So that was one of the things with John. I relayed to him my experience and how it kind of ended poorly. And, I kind of like, well, I don't, it can't interfere with my kids. I can't do that. And he was like, no, dude, you don't get it. This is your podcast. You bring on who you want, when you want. You film when you want. Film when you don't have your kids. I don't care what you do. If you don't want to film for 6 months, I don't care. It's your
Hmm.
podcast. This is the ground rules. So he gave me, and the ground rules were very beneficial for me, basically, just in the sense of having that freedom of doing what I
Yeah.
want. So it allows me the opportunity because I haven't been doing conferences. I haven't really seen a lot of writers in a while. It
Hmm.
allows me to bring writers on and just talk
Yep.
about the craft and whether they write. I'm going to try to bring on some musicians. I've got some connections with some
Ooh.
pretty, well-to-do that aren't coming yet, but they might, they've agreed to come on. So I'm going to keep, gently being like, hey, remember you said you'd come on the podcast? Um, but in the meantime, there's so many great writers to choose from. I just had Chris Cochran on the other day, which was my biggest viewed YouTube views. and he's a comic book creator, and he's an
Ooh.
artist, and he's
Uh-huh.
actually doing John's Guarnieri's comic book. So they've been open and talked about that. So I had him on. And it was just fascinating to talk about someone that writes. And I brought out my box of comics that I've had literally in a plastic tote for 20 years. I haven't opened, but they're sealed. And, I'm expecting all the other mothers and kids to throw theirs away. So each one becomes worth like, $10,000. So I can be rich and not have to talk to anyone ever again from my island
Sounds
in
glorious.
Fiji. Yeah.
Yes.
The
Just
the
write
dream.
the book, be on
Dream.
Fiji,
The
drink
dream that
Fijian
doesn't
water.
happen. But
Yes.
no, so it was cool. I brought up the comics, and every comic I picked up and put to the screen, he was like, boom, 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 buy this, and this is the artist. And I'm looking at going, well, I don't even know what this comic is. I bought it years ago, and I just don't remember. It's been sitting in a box for 20 years, and such a great experience. So that interaction, just talking with you,
Hmm.
these are the fun things that as a writer, a lot of times you're just in your world. I have a 9 to 5 job. I have amazing children, and I do a lot of stuff with them, but I don't get to talk shop with people. So I end up doing probably 2 episodes a week, and then I don't do one. So the
Yeah.
weeks my kids normally with in
Hmm.
the summer it's a week on, week off. In the school schedule, it ends up being like Friday night until Wednesday. I don't have kids every other week, so I do two those
You're
spurs
able
without
to,
kids. I do
yeah.
2 episodes, so I knock two out. So 4 times a month, I'm doing
Hmm.
2 and 2. And so those 2 hours, I get to just talk to people, and sometimes they're longer, sometimes they're shorter. I had Meg Gardner on last week. Her episode is going to air this coming Monday. So her
Awesome.
book Shadowheart just came out as same publication date as me, and we were talking about Heat and Heat 2, and I'm like, you don't get it. Heat's over there in my entertainment center, and that's like one of my top 20, at least maybe top 10 movies.
I have
So
rewatched that scene with Pacino and De Niro
that is,
so many times. It is like I so just chef's kiss, good writing at its oh,
yes,
and
that
acting,
scene.
performing, all that stuff.
Very few things you can say this about, but I think that scene is perfection from a
Hmm.
cinematic, not cinematic beauty, just the
Hmm.
way everything was put together, the way they interacted, the way it really kind of almost blurred the lines between the good guy and the bad guy. You still think De Niro is the bad guy, of course, but you kind of see that, taking that, getting doing scores is his thing, and Pacino taking down scores, that's his thing. And they're just two guys that are polar opposites, but I think that should be played right now in our country. And I won't get political. I don't get political on my podcast. We're
Hmm.
not going to get on yours, but I think everyone just needs to sit down and be like, hey, if Pacino and De Niro don't pull out guns and blow each other's brains out in that booth, guess what? We can probably get along. Joe Biden might not actually be the devil incarnate, and Donald Trump might not be the devil incarnate. Maybe we
You're
can
saying such
find.
controversial things,
I
Eric. My
know, I know.
goodness.
I'm canceled for sure now. My goodness,
You're
Matt.
talking about people being moderated, not being outsized reactions to political things that are outside their control. Don't you know this is America? We only have one level, loud.
Loudon. Don't you see now why I want to sell these comics for 10,000 a pop and go buy an island in Fiji? That way I can just write in peace. There's no Fox News or CNN or Twitter or Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or uh although the rockets going up is kind of cool. But I swear I'm seeing videos now that they're hitting a firmament because it's really flat Earth and there's really a dome over the. I mean, that's one thing that, and I'm not these things are amazing technologies, and we get to do so many cool things. I'll do online banking, do buy trips to. I'm going to Dublin, going to Ireland later this year. I
Ooh.
get to do cool things and all this. But I think at the end of the day, those are the end of days right there, because my goodness, I don't know if you're a real person, T. You could very well be an AI generated person that's just trying to, I don't know, do something that you should
I,
nefarious,
I'm
must be.
fishing for information from
You're
you that I'm taking into the data banks to then regurgitate and take into the algorithm and
I'm going to see a book behind you that has Washington sitting on a pedestal, and it's going to say Treach of Brust, and I'm going to say Treach of Brust. That's that. Like, this looks vaguely familiar of a title. What did you do? You stole my book and rewrote it in your version, and made yourself the president now. Um, So we did talk offline, and I'll answer. I will say it on air too. The president is a fictional character in this book, but there are some loose traits based on a friend of mine, a friend that I just went and had lunch with and went hiking at Carl Sandburg National Historic Site today. And his wife was really named Allie, and but they don't have that many kids. And he really like in the book it mentions there's a conversation between him and the body man, and he asks the body man what the body man thinks about him. And he really is kind of he asks if he's cheap. He said, Mr. President, you're thrifty because a good and he's an Eagle Scout, really
It's a
like the
good
president. He's an Eagle
response.
Scout. So those are kind of we talked offline about it. Those are kind of the fun things that you get to put and people don't know when
Hmm.
you are unless the author blabs about it, but you get to put some real stuff.
Hmm.
And that for me as the writer, I'll read back on something I wrote maybe a couple of years ago and I'll be like, oh, that's right, I put that in there. That's going to be there for now to eternity or until the EMP goes off or Russia launches the ICBMs. Well, maybe in some cave somewhere, a copy of Body Man and Breach of Trust will be the only thing people got to read over candlelight. And they'll be like, oh, this president preacher, he is kind of thrifty. Like, okay, well, TC got burned up in the first initial blast, but someone still hears about him. So he lives on. You might
Eric.
be a character one day. How's that? Now,
Ooh.
I will say, now I warn you before I say
Hmm.
that. Um, for anyone that read Ransom Daughter, there is a Terrence in there.
Yes, I did.
Sarge.
Yes,
It is not based on you. He is
that's right.
actually a African American gentleman. He's he's
Hmm.
a very big stature. He's a big boy that can kick tail and take names.
Do I
Um,
not have that complexion and size? Like I've been working out in the gym. Look at my muscles.
I don't want to get canceled the week my book comes out. So,
Smart man.
yes, kids, I'll be right there. They're with their mother, but we're not going to admit that. Yeah, I'm wrapping up with some crazy person right now. Just give me a second. No, but that name can get reused somewhere else. Well, we can find out. But no, I joke about it, but and I've mentioned this in some other podcasts. I had some texts going back and forth with Ama Adair. I'm not sure if you're familiar with
Yes, I
Ama
saw
Adair.
that. I caught that one. I was like, wait a minute.
So don't say anything yet because she might see this
Mhm.
podcast. So we've been friends for a while. I got her tickets to go to see Shinedown a couple years ago,
Oh,
which
that's so
came
cool.
from John. John Guarnieri took care of all that. I was the vessel that was like, hey, can we get tickets for Ama? They were bigger fans than I was at the time. They had an amazing experience, and we've just kind of bonded over the past couple of years. I met her husband Jake. They're just that's again the writing community. You meet good people and you connect
Hmm.
because you have a love of writing. Well, she won a contest a couple of years ago for me to kill her in the most epic death possible. And so I wrote that thing, and I'm not exaggerating. I cried when I wrote it, and every
Hmm.
time I read it, I either cried or teared up. And I'm
Hmm.
like, and I told her this, and I was like, "You're gonna read this one day, and you're gonna cry." And she was like, "No, I'm not. I don't cry." And I'm like, "You veterans, you're so tough. You pushed babies out. What do you think you're? You think you're, omnipotent here? You're gonna cry." Truth be told, she probably won't cry. But we had a little bet going on. I think we're
Hmm.
betting a G650. I think we're up to that now, probably.
Okay.
Little, yeah, I have to pull out of the Cayman money that I've been squirreling away
Yes.
from the
Hmm.
government. So
Yes.
scratch that, Google.
Hmm.
But so what we've decided, she texted me actually today about it, and we were going to film tonight, but it's not working, so we're going to film next week from Saturday. I sent her an early copy, really, and a done copy. It really wasn't advanced copy even, but I sent her a copy just like this of the Body Man proof copy. Well, being the good friend I am, I ripped her chapter out, literally ripped it out, folded it, sealed it, wax sealed, and put a nasty note on the top of you can't do that. And she had to read the book minus her chapter. And she is reading her chapter on A Tale of Two Scribes next Saturday live. Well, not
Oh,
live,
that's
we're
so
recording it.
cool.
So we're going to talk about writing and how we met and how she got involved in her writing. And I want to promote her as well because she is
Hmm.
really someone that should have a major publisher. She's an amazing
Hmm.
writer. Again, the publishing industry is broken. Um, but she agreed, and it was actually more partially her idea of wanting to record herself somehow. And I'm like, well, why don't you come on the podcast? If it
Immediately,
fails
yes.
miserably, we'll do it at the end of the podcast so we can at least
Hmm.
have a conversation. If we record
Yeah.
it, and she just gets like mad at me, like I'm going to kill you for saying what you said and bringing my
Hmm.
blank, 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 blank. I can just be like, just hit that stop, and then I can just record
Yes.
when she's done and be like, Ama exploded in a fit of rage, so we don't have her reading tonight because she's got anger issues. So
Hmm.
hopefully she's getting the help she needs. So that's
This
all.
podcast sponsored by BetterHelp.
Yes, sponsored by Pfizer. She needs it. She needs the shot now, so she needs something to calm her down. But no, so it's gonna be fun. It's a little. She sent me a nice. We had the back and forth this morning, and I said, "Well, did you at least like the story?" And basically, like, yeah, it was good, but I'm really pissed at you because I don't know what happened in that one part. And I'm like, "Well, we're gonna find out." She goes, "I really want to get the other copy I have and read it," and I'm like. Nope, nope. End of friendship if you do that. You can't do that. You can't cheat. You got to read it. And I'm gonna see if I can reach out to her husband, Jake, who's a great guy, and
Hmm.
see if he can somehow make her cry, like while she's reading it. Like, I don't know, stab her or poke her with a pin or put something in her drink. Is there anything in your drink that makes you cry? I know you can like, go to sleep, but no. It'll be fun. It's again,
Hmm.
it's done more in tongue in cheek and just as a friend. And
Hmm.
um again, you have to kill someone, so why not
Yeah,
kill someone and
exactly.
challenge yourself? Now she'll probably do get back to me in a future book of one of hers.
Hmm.
It'll probably be much better than what I do to her, and she hasn't said she'd do that. But if honestly, if she did do that, that would make me. I've been in a couple books.
Hmm.
One of four, a book with Travis Davis just came out, and I think I have like one name drop in two different places, the name Bishop as a character. But
Oh, that's cool.
but I didn't know that until I read it, and I
Hmm.
asked. He said I put you in there just as a thank you because I had helped him kind of go the self publishing route.
Hmm.
Man, that's awesome. I don't care, I do care that I write books, but to know that I'm in someone else's book, as a kid who read pretty
Hmm.
all the time, basically, starting with Clancy and moving on to, and even before Clancy, I read actually like, the Dickens and
The
Alexander
classics.
Dumas, I read the classics. I read Shakespeare. I've got Shakespeare's complete work still down here at the bottom of my shelf. And that's a book that if you're gonna John Wick someone,
You're gonna use Shakespeare.
hit them with that book because they ain't getting up, and neither is their family. If they're all there, you line them up and just hit them all with that book. Um, but no, you grew up reading, and to
Hmm.
now years later write your own books, but then also see your name in any form in a friend's book or another author that just throws you in there. And it's only happened a couple times, but it's one of those things you pinch yourself and go, okay, that's pretty cool. I'm keeping that book. I'm gonna get it signed by the author, and that's something that I can be like, hey. And I've said it to my kids a few times. I pulled out. They get annoyed by it. So we were in Barnes and Noble a couple months ago with my niece and
Hmm.
nephew, and we're going through not the new releases because it couldn't have been, but it was a hardcover thing. And I pulled out a couple books, and I was like, hey, look, that's me in the acknowledgments. It was, big name author. And they're just like, so yeah, you're in his, they didn't care, nothing. Like you're so not cool for even having to point that out. And it's like, can you not give me a little bit of an ego
Just I only
boost?
ask this much.
It's
This
like,
much.
again, if you ever future advice that you don't need, if you ever have kids, they will crush your soul and spirit. They are the
Hmm.
most special thing you've created in life, and you'll love them more than you'll love yourself. But they will decimate your manhood any chance they get. And so accept that from the get-go.
With that uplifting advice.
We need to, yeah, we can't end with that one.
Uh, hey, just as we're wrapping up here,
Yes.
what do you have cooking next? What can we expect? And then where can people go to learn more about you and your work?
So a couple people have told me I got too much cooking, but now that Breach of Trust is out, I get to flip a little switch here that doesn't really
Well-deserved
exist.
break. Hmm.
I've got a project with some other folks, is all I can say, that I
Ooh.
need to hop back to this week. And but then I really got to put my attention to the next book that's in the Omega Group series. So the
Hmm.
team that was part of Ransom Daughter. I've been announcing it this week, so it's not a mystery anymore. But that will be called Babylon Will Rise, not a
Ooh.
novella. That is a
Hmm.
full-length novel. If anyone knows where Babylon is on their map, which most
Hmm.
Americans probably don't, but well-educated international people will know, oh shoot, that's where it's happening. That's where that
Hmm.
book's happening, at least part of it.
Cool.
Get back on track with that, and then next year I'm planning on doing, so that's two this year is the plan. Plan is
Hmm.
to do two next year under my Bruno Media Publishing as well. Merci de Atta, who was my assassin in the first two
Hmm.
Bodyman series books, she gets promoted to her own book, which is called Supreme Justice. And
Ooh.
the target is a Supreme Court justice. And there is a large case involving a needle that not everybody wanted to get that makes it
Oh.
all the way to the Supreme Court. And Merci gets called in to complicate the situation.
I
So that's gonna be a fun one. I'm looking. That one's there, not yet done,
hmm
but I'll finish it this year. Get it edited by spring will be the plan. I could probably work you into an advanced reader for that one. And then at the end of next year, I'm kind of sticking in the Omega Group world in the fall
hmm
for at least currently. The end of next 2025, I'm going to put up Troy's backstory. So it's an
Okay.
origin story book because
hmm
Troy, who's the captain of the Omega Group, he was originally going to follow his dad's footsteps and he was going to join the FBI. His dad was a Secret Service, or he was special agent in charge of the FBI field office. Sorry. And 9/11 changed everything. And it was a
hmm
story that I had written a while ago, and I've changed a lot as an author. So I'm going in later this year, early next year, and start kind of making some of my boo boos go away. But it was a really good story, but it felt like 9/11 was too fresh
Yeah.
a while ago. And I think we've now kind of reached that threshold where people are talking about it. It's in movies now.
hmm
You got kids that are born now,
Yeah.
kids that are having kids that never saw 9/11. That,
Yeah.
they just saw pictures of it. So I think the shock and the story is not a shock value, but the events of 9/11 and in particular Building 7 actually is where some of the plot line comes from, not the actual towers, but
hmm
stuff that happened in Building 7, some fact, some fiction that kind of propels that storyline. And it changes Troy's, I'll say at this stage, is it changes the trajectory of Troy's life, and he ends up
hmm
joining the army, not going working at the FBI. So that's the story that it's been near and dear to my heart, and I didn't know that I'd be able to get a publisher. And once I started the brand, I kind of just acknowledged and accepted the fact of last year of, man, I've got some stories that I've started or some that I've finished that weren't good enough to be published, but now the stories were good enough, the concept was good enough.
hmm
I have the resources and availability in my writing knowledge to go back and fix them now. And I've got
hmm
this brand I can put them out because I had some extremely successful writer years ago when I was writing the Troy Evans books to start with was like, well, just self-publish them. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want to self-publish.
hmm
And I didn't. So I just stuck them in a drawer or on a hard drive, really. So I can revisit those stories now. And I don't know that I'll be able to maintain two series every year, one for each
hmm
series, but at least for the next couple of years, because I have stockpiled some stuff.
hmm
That's the plan. And then 2026, I'm planning for to go back in the world of probably the third Body Man book. I have the title, which the title is Kick Butt Title. I love the title. I know where it starts because I wrote the first couple chapters. Don't know where it's going to go. So that one I'll probably start working on sometime next year and then put it out in 2026 would be the plan. Um, unless the missiles get lobbed. And if so, we won't have to worry about this podcast. No one will see it
But
anymore.
at least you've got a plan, and that's the thing that matters. You are constantly an inspiration, Eric.
Thank
Where
you.
can people go to learn more about you and your
Yes,
books?
you did ask that question. The easiest thing to do is probably go to my website, ericpbishop.com. My middle name is Paul, so that's what the P stands for. Ericpbishop.com. And then if you go to Amazon, you type in The Body Man or Breach of Trust, I'm probably going to be the first one that pops up with my name, Eric P. Bishop, after the names. I mean, actually, this month too, the Body Man got picked by a Kindle deal,
Ooh.
Kindle ebook deal. So it's $2.99 for the month of June. They set the price. I can't change it. I can't do anything to it. So it's actually been selling pretty well this month at a deal for folks. And if you want to know where it starts before, and Breach of Trust can be read without reading the Body Man, but
hmm
if you already have the Body Man, go pick up an ebook and email it to someone, send them the copies. So
Awesome. Well, we'll link all that in the show notes. Eric,
awesome.
thank you again for coming on the show.
Thanks, Terrence. Thanks for having me on. Congratulations again on your engagement, and I
Thank
hope
you.
you have a beautiful life.
Thanks.